This episode contains information that will be disturbing to some listeners. Since my March 2017 jailhouse interview with Jamie Osuna, I've gotten this question a lot.
I'm just curious, how did you feel?
This time, the person asking me was Jamie's ex-wife.
Being so young and being with someone who did that, as a woman.
Well, honestly, I was just really shocked that he was actually admitting to it, because that just doesn't happen.
But you're brave. I wanted to hear if you were afraid, but you've got what it takes. You're brave.
You know,
I wouldn't have been able to sit in that room. I don't care how bolted down he was. I couldn't have done it.
Her response was one I've also gotten a lot, but it was strange hearing it from the woman who was once married to him. Though I appreciated her honesty. Was my answer of just being surprised because of his confession honest? Well, for the most part. I mean it when I said jailhouse confessions don't happen. Aside from Osuna, this is the only other time I've gotten an admission of guilt from an inmate. Alan, how did you get yourself in this situation?
Bad plenty.
A jailhouse interview with an elderly man accused of being an animal hoarder. He had over 140 dogs.
Started out with 6 dogs, and I didn't get to the vet in time to get everybody fixed. Then finally they just got away from me, too many puppies.
Did you see this coming?
I knew it was coming, believe me, I did.
So you do acknowledge this situation was out of control?
It was, oh, absolutely, it was out of control.
So yeah, Osuna's confession was unexpected. But it was more than that. There was more going on inside my head than just, wow, can't believe he admitted to it. There was an odd process going on inside my brain. I was understanding a lot of what Osuna was saying to me, which felt very strange. You'd like to think that you wouldn't be able to understand the thinking of someone like Jamie Osuna. But to some extent, he had an eerily logical and comprehensive way of explaining things to me. Now, before we dive into his interview, I want to clarify that we're only playing parts of our recording, not the whole thing in full. After you hear this, you might ask yourself, he really gets more twisted than this? The answer is yes, he does. And that audio will never be released by my station. What is your life like if you had to describe it to someone?
It's been quite interesting. It's been quite an adventure. Interesting. There's ills, there's joys, there's laughters, there's cries, but all in all, I wouldn't change anything. I loved what I experienced and loved what I go through, and to this day, they ask me if I can go back in time and change anything. Will I? No, I will not. Even in this case, in this murder case, if I can go back and change it, I will do it again and over again. And if I'm released, I'll probably end up back here with the same thing. So.
I'm Olivia LaVoice. This is the man with 1,000 faces. Jamie Osuna has been interviewed by reporters twice. Shortly after he was arrested for the murder of Yvette Pena in 2011, he gave a short interview to my news station and denied everything. 6 years later, when I went to see him, just days before the case went to trial, he confessed to me that he was guilty of the murder, and he told me a lot more. As we've already told you, Jamie was upfront about getting a thrill from murder. But he was also upfront about violence just being part of who he is.
It wasn't just this case in this time that I was doing good and then, something just happened and look at me, here I'm now. It's just part of my character.
But what does that really mean, part of one's character? What does it really mean to get a thrill out of killing?
Can you describe what it feels like when you're committing a murder? I mean, you can't really put your finger
Okay,
on
fine,
it,
then you wanted to get into the whole psychological aspect, which I know. I'm going to tell you, based on the fact that maybe my son is going to grow older and he is going to be able to look at all this so he can backtrack and see my mentality as of right now. I've been a cutter since I was 12 years old, all of my arms since I was 12. And I've been that type of person where as I grow older and older, I seem to get more disconnected emotionally and physically to things. So it's hard to get an emotional sense of things. Like if you say a joke or everybody else is laughing, it's funny, I know it's funny, but I just don't feel it, you know. So, or let's say tattooing or something like that, it gets to the point too to where first it hurts, later on you get older and older, it doesn't, cutting doesn't, then it gets to the point where you're mutilating yourself to feel that adrenaline, to feel that pain. So as far as murder goes and why, is a simple fact that I've done everything that I can do to my body that I could think possible to bring pain and bring feeling upon myself, to make myself feel alive. I'd rather feel pain than nothing at all, basically. So as you kill a person, it's more of a trying to get a rush. It's a rush, it's an addiction, it's a drug. I would rather do that than do drugs. I'd rather do that than have sex with the beautifulest woman in the world.
Forensic psychologist Dr. Chris Mahandi.
What I'm hearing about Mr. Osuna is that he didn't feel alive. He felt dead. He didn't have any emotional experience. Cutting gave him a sense of being alive and having an experience of emotion. Now, the idea that resorting to killing others is probably not unusual among serial killers. The killing, the hunt, and everything surrounding it may be the most alive and stimulated that they feel in their lives.
But Osuna explained that it's not as simple as just killing someone. In his eyes, to get true emotional fulfillment, you have to take it a step further. Warning, this will be difficult to hear.
See, a person, when they commit a murder, they can shoot somebody. See, when you shoot somebody, the gun is mostly doing all the work. You know, the bullet goes, you see the red splat, the person drops. You might shoot him in the head, his brains might spread. That's it. You might forget about it a year, 2 years later. You might have glimpses. But as you torture and stay with the body even afterwards, the smell, the decomposing, the maggot and fly activity that occurs and all that. You know, when you experience and you go through all that stuff, it stays with you forever. For me, it's not a nightmare. For me, it is a, how can I say, like a prize, like a trophy. It's a picture, it's a memory, it's a photograph that I can go back and look and get pleasure from it. There you go.
As he went on, there was a part of me that wanted to try to get to him, maybe catch him off guard. So I brought up the only thing I could think of that I thought might be his Achilles heel.
Do you love your son?
Yes, I do love my son.
But he was a step ahead of me.
And basically, if something like this were to happen to him, I would have to accept it. I understand people might say, well, what if you were in her position? Or what if you were her kids and that was your mother or your relative or your grandmother that you love? But I just have that heart that it is what it is, and life is an experience, and life moves on, and life is life.
At one point when talking about killing Yvette Pena, Jamie kept going back to his decision to not clean up the crime scene at the motel.
I left all my fingerprints and DNA and all that. I've done this many times before. I've done crimes before, and I know how to clean shit up.
As he explained his rationale behind this, it opened up a new topic of conversation that very much piqued my interest.
I basically had enough. I didn't really want to be in this society no more. I've been in solitude, incarcerated my whole life. This is much, basically, is what I know, you know. And there was no other circumstances as far as like burglary or any type of situation that went wrong. It was more of this is an opportunity, because I did crimes before that they don't know about. So this has just happened to be the one that was just like, all right, this is the rock bottom. This is time. This is it.
Have you killed anyone else?
Yes.
How many others?
2.
Who are they?
Can't tell you, but you will find out. Because I always got to have an ace in the hole. See, when I get convicted of this, I'm going to go to death row. When I go to San Quentin, I'll probably do 10, 15 years. I'll probably use that to my leverage. You know?
Why do you target women?
It's not just women. It's more of a opportunity. The other 2 people, one was a male, so it's not just opportunity.
Your
so
other
male.
homicide victims, so the 2 others?
One male, one female. So this has just happened to be, one of those situations.
For the rest of the interview, I'd continue to go back to these 2 victims whenever I felt I could. I wanted to keep him talking, but I just couldn't drop it.
These other 2 victims, did you kill them because they were vulnerable?
No.
They were weaker than you?
No.
Why did you do that?
No. It's opportunity. Opportunity. I don't care if you're a lawyer. I don't care if you're a teacher. I don't care if you're a gang member. I don't care if you're my brother or sister. I don't care if you're whoever. It's the choices that I make at that time. It's self-gratification. A human is a human to me when they're stripped down. Their background, what they believe in, I could really care less.
How old were you when you committed your first murder?
13.
13?
13 years old.
How old was the victim?
The victim was 27.
How does a 13-year-old get themselves in a situation
And then the other one,
murdering a 27-year-old?
well, then the other one was in 2007, November 2007. 32-year-old female.
So when you were 13 years old, you killed a 27-year-old male?
Yes.
How? What are the circumstances behind that?
Kind of don't want to get into that because I was young at that age, and that part had to do with, how can I say it, a certain, what is that word? I was kind of like a protege, had a teacher. Really don't want to get into that one because I was kind of guided on that one. I was kind of helped with a little bit, but that was the first taste of.
Was that gang related?
No.
No.
None of my crimes are gang related.
But you have someone in your life who taught you how to kill? Is that what you're saying?
There was a friend that to these days I still got friends that way that believe in the same stuff that I believe in.
And then in 2007 you killed a 32-year-old woman?
Yeah, I did it. I committed it.
Where did you kill that
So you're getting into details now and I can't. Sorry. It's one of the questions I can't ask. But the orchards, I can say. I'll put the orchards out there. Kirk County has a lot of orchards.
Do you know if this woman had friends and family that have been wondering all this time who would have done this to her?
I'll tell you what. No, I have no remorse. And yes, I knew they had a family. And just because of when I snatched them up, the credentials that they had on them and the IDs and everything, and I was able to go through their phone and see what the kids, the pictures and stuff like that. So that's how I was able to put together the person.
Mothers.
Yes, Yvette and her, and then one man. So no, I have no remorse. No.
I'm a little
sympathy.
confused because I'm hearing that you want to get this case over with. You don't want to go to trial. You're admitting your guilt. You're accepting that you're going to go to death row, but you're also saying that you have other crimes that you're partially admitting to, but you want to use them down the road to try to get off.
See what you see? No, not get off death row. See, you have to understand. There's a whole psychological aspect about this.
Here it was, his reasoning behind dangling some information about unsolved murders over my head without fully confessing.
See, when you get convicted and you get all the skeletons out of the closet, emotionally, psychologically, you feel empty when you get chained and shackled up and go to CDC, because I've been in many prisons before. So when I go up there, I want to have these, this something to hold on to, something to when the time comes, I can bring it up.
Osuna felt guarding his dark secrets, being the only one with the information, would somehow help him feel less empty inside.
So then you don't want to be known as a serial
No.
So you know when people see this, of course they're going to say you're a monster. Is that a fair assessment?
A monster. They can call me what they will, but I guess you can say a devil as will. So be a monster, yes, I guess. I don't recognize myself as one, but...
So if you don't recognize yourself as a monster, what do you recognize yourself as?
I recognize myself as one who is not afraid to indulge himself without the consequences and let society mold him into as laws change, and as laws change and society change, people change with it. They let themselves be molded like clay. Me, I'm self-made. I know what's wrong, what's right. I know what consequences are. I know the inevitable of everything that I do. I know what people that are ignorant to my situation, that are going to judge me or put some type of stigma on me, which is okay, which is fine. That's because of their ignorance. But otherwise, I'm self-made and I'm proud of it.
You're sure you don't want to be... See, it's confusing to me you saying you don't want to be considered a serial killer if you're saying, because a lot of people might think, he's just saying that he's killed other people just so he can be looked at.
Regardless if these other people are brought up or not, it's not. That's brought up to answer one of your questions. So
you don't want to give their family closure?
No, I don't. If you kill people the way I do you really think I really care about giving family closure? So I can care less what people think, look at me. I can care less, because at the end of it, when I leave here, I'm going to go to my cell. The cell's going to close. It's going to be quiet, and it's going to be my own little universe in there, my own little world. And really doesn't matter what is outside that window or what is even being said. I don't even care about visits. I can care less about commissary. I can care less about getting on the phone, talking to my family. I'm my own self-absorbed person. I have my own perspectives of things around me, how I see things. So as far as your question about me saying things for people to see me in a certain perspective, and to see me to portray myself and convey myself as a certain stigma, no, I can care less about that. I'm just answering your questions, and you're answering deep questions. You're answering questions that can't be answered with a yes, no, nothing like that.
What are the other victims' names?
First you asked me when, where, now the names.
Yeah.
That is not going to get answered. If I'm not going to tell you, I told you when, that should be enough. Okay, that should narrow it down. Kern County, Orchards, you got the dates, you got the tape. Let's go to cold cases. There it is there, whatever. So, next question, if there's any.
You might have been able to gather what he said that I really cared about. And possible unsolved murders he could be responsible for is something we'll get into later. First, I want to explore a little more about who Jamie Osuna is. When I first saw the crime scene photos of his beheaded, mutilated cellmate, my eyes gravitated towards the writing on the wall, in blood. The most prominent thing he wrote was, "I am a man with 1,000 faces." What does he mean by that? Was this a reference to the 1957 film, The Man of a Thousand Faces?
The world, fascinated and thrilled, called him the Man of a Thousand Faces.
The film tells the story of a 1920s movie star renowned for his ability to play a series of different characters that were often considered grotesque and afflicted. We don't know if Jamie is familiar with the film or the message he was trying to convey, but when I read it, I couldn't help but think of the seemingly different versions of Jamie I'd become familiar with.
I don't really know if he buys the Satanism stuff. I think he just wants to be scary to people.
Prosecutor Nick Lackey has the same stance as many people I've spoken to about Jamie Osuna being a Satanist. Does he really worship the devil? We don't know. But in letters he mailed to the district attorney in 2013, he talks about praising Satan constantly. He includes drawings of pentagrams, similar to his forehead tattoo, and often signs the letter to the DA as your diabolical friend Osuna. But before he labeled himself as a worshiper of Satan, Jamie was labeled as something else, a gang member. According to court documents, his gang name was Loquito, which in Spanish means the little crazy one. He had the tattoos to prove it, that are now covered up by his Joker eyes. But when he was arrested in 2011, former 17 News reporter Nate Kelly noticed the gang signs.
Can I ask, are you in a gang?
I was just in a street gang, in a prison gang, but not no more. I got out for my wife and for my kid.
This brings us to another image of Jamie, a husband and a father. Or as Osuna's ex-wife once said, Groomzilla and Fatherzilla, because he was, quote, so into it. If I hadn't seen the photos of Jamie cradling his infant son, I might not believe it.
He was really educated.
Knowledgeable is a description I've actually heard from a lot of people who know Jamie. Here's his brother Kurt explaining how when Jamie was released from prison, he'd spend most of his time at home reading.
At my grandmother's house, he had a whole wall was a bookshelf. It was full of books. He would just sit in there and read all day.
Do you have any idea, like, what he was reading? Like, what type of books he liked?
It was mostly psychology, I believe, because he would always talk about reverse psychology and mental illnesses.
Do you think he has mental illness?
I wouldn't doubt it.
Mentally ill Jamie, depending on who you talk to, is another identity of his. It's one people ask me about a lot. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have all the answers. But I guess I look at it like this. Can anyone who's admitted to watching a body decompose in order to get a mental photograph that would last a lifetime really be considered sane? Prosecutor Nick Lackey and I discuss. Is he crazy? I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that question. I mean, how could you not be mentally ill to be that person? But at the same time, he knows exactly what he's doing.
I think you've answered it exactly right. What do you mean crazy? Because in a way, of course he's crazy, because to do what he did, you can't be right mentally. You can't be a mentally healthy person and do what he did. The legal definition of crazy is somebody who doesn't have the ability to know the difference between right and wrong in their actions. I think he's sane from that perspective. He knows what he's doing is wrong. And as you point out, he's very logical. He knows how to get done what he wants done. He's very rational, and he knows what he wants, and he knows what to do to get it.
Jamie has been diagnosed with mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia, according to court documents. Another court document suggests he's paranoid, but those same court documents also describe his mental state as, quote, fair, whatever that means. His mental health is a complex topic for me. There are some criminals my station's covered who genuinely couldn't seem to understand what they were incarcerated for or what was happening around them. Jamie Osuna isn't like that. Does that make him sane? Does that mean he isn't sick? No. But when we look at admitted diabolical killers, society as a whole doesn't typically describe them as mentally ill. Sociopath and psychopath tend to be the go-to label. And in this latest murder case Jamie is facing involving his cellmate, he also wrote on the walls in blood, in shockingly neat handwriting I might add, quote, I'm not mad, just differently sane. Which makes sense to me. In his mind, he is sane, just not in the same way as most of society. And in 2015, court-appointed psychiatrists found him legally sane to stand trial for the murder of Yvette Peña. His mental health is an issue that will no doubt surface again in his upcoming murder trial. Now, there was something else Jamie wrote all over the walls, and when I say all over, I mean it. Ha, ha, ha. He's been known to write that in letters from jail. And while it's purely speculation, my mind goes to the ink all over his face. The appearance of an evil clown, the Joker. It's not just the tattoo. I've seen messages Jamie sent to his ex-wife documented in police reports where he literally sounds like the Joker. For no clear reason, he'd text his wife things like, "Why so serious?" and lots of eerie, bizarre-sounding texts about smiling. He also sent the district attorney, Lisa Green, letters from jail that included printed photos of her face with a Joker smile and Joker eyes drawn in red ink, as well as her neck slit with the red ink dripping down the photo of her. Underneath her photo, Osuna wrote, "Smile now, die later. Why so serious?" and "Smile more, maggot." Clearly, he's taking some of his lines straight out of the 2008 Batman film, The Dark Knight.
Why so serious?
Recently, I learned there was one more thing Jamie wrote on his cell walls in blood that the crime scene photos I have don't show. You will never be lonely. You will never be sad. You will always have me to dance with. When I heard this, I was in my news director's office, and while I pondered what in the world could he possibly mean by that, my news director printed out an old Batman comic and handed it to me. There it was in black and white. The Joker told Batman, "You will always have me to dance with." So what is it about Jamie and the Joker? Does it go deeper than Jamie liking the comic book character? Does it go deeper than Jamie thinking the image is cool, scary, what have you? Who knows? In the latest adaptation, in the movie Joker, the audience sees the progression of the famed villain as he grapples with mental illness and abuse as a young child at the hands of a man his mother brought into the home, while the mother stands by and allows it. We watch the Joker struggle to understand and blend in with society. We see him watch people laugh at a joke, so he laughs too, but he's faking it. An eerily similar moment to when Jamie told me when people laugh at jokes, he gets it's supposed to be funny, but he just doesn't feel it. Taking a step back and looking at the film as a regular viewer, not a journalist tied to the Jamie Osuna story, it seems to me the audience is meant to take away that abuse, trauma, mental illness, and rejection formed the dark path for the Joker. It's highly unlikely that Jamie will ever see the film, and I don't know if anyone familiar with Jamie has seen it, but a few months ago, the trailer for the new movie was brought up in passing by Jamie's brother Kurt, making it clear, for better or worse, the Joker is part of Jamie's identity.
How do people usually react when they find out that he's your brother?
I don't really tell anybody. Nobody really. I'm way over here in Arizona, so nobody over here knows much about it. I have one coworker that's seen it on the news that reached all the way over here. There's a new movie coming out called Joker, and the guy has the makeup, and it kind of looks like my brother's face tattoos. And he was like, "Man, I've seen this guy on the news. He has tattoos like that." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And then, he pulled up the article, and I was like, "Yeah, that's my brother."
The article Jamie's brother's coworker saw was about the latest murder Jamie is accused of, involving his cellmate.
How did he react when you said that, "Oh, that's my brother"?
He thought I was joking. He's like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah, we got, same mom, different dad." And he was just talking about, what the article said about the eyes and the tongue and the lungs or whatever happened in that cell. He was talking about that, and I was like, he's like, "I don't know how anybody can do that." He's like, "Damn, it's crazy." I was like, "I don't know either."
What wasn't in those articles or even noted in the autopsy report, but something I noticed immediately in crime scene photos, on Osuna's cellmate's decapitated head was a Joker smile.
You realize that a lot of people think that your brother is evil, right?
I think they only think that because of his appearance.
Well, I think that definitely plays into it, but I think it's also, what he's done, and then that he claims to have no remorse whatsoever.
Yeah. In the interviews, the things that he said about torturing cats and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to hear that because that's not the person that I know. I don't know. I don't know if he has split personality or what, because the things that, he's talked about, I've never seen him, heard him do or thought that, that he might have been doing those things.
This brings us to what Jamie said in his jailhouse interview with me that I've never been able to stop wondering about. Was he telling me the truth when he said he's responsible for 2 unsolved murders? Of course, I've always known it's possible he was making it up. But that thought became a little personal after I spoke with Jamie's ex-wife.
She kept saying, I think I'm going to call Olivia LeVois. I think I'm going to write her. I think I'm going to write her. I tried to warn you a little bit. I tried. I don't know how to warn you as a reporter, but that he's very manipulative.
It was a little creepy to hear his ex-wife say this.
He told me he totally enjoyed your interviews, looking at you, being in your company. You smelled good.
But when she told me to be cautious about him getting me to believe certain things, perhaps to keep me interested in him, it struck a chord in me. See, the thing is, anyone who's watched my news station semi-regularly knows that cold cases, unsolved crimes are my thing. It's what I'm most passionate about and what I cover the most. So if Jamie Osuna was in any way trying to pique my interest in him, claiming responsibility to unsolved murders might just be the best way to do it. Taking my connection to cold cases out of it, one could argue a dozen other reasons why he'd lie about it. And again, I'm fully aware of those reasons. I've heard them from cops, prosecutors, defense attorneys, even my own colleagues. But in my opinion, the possibility that he was telling the truth still deserves our attention. If 2 murders could be solved, we need to know.
I've tried getting that information from him. I tried finding out.
This is Jamie's brother, Kurt, explaining how when it came to Jamie being a cold-blooded killer, he wanted to hear that come from Jamie himself.
I just wanted to know if my brother was capable of doing what everyone's saying that he did. I tried asking him, but he never said anything. He didn't even answer my question.
Kurt, Jamie's mother, and other family members wouldn't actually hear his confessions until after we released snippets of my jailhouse interview. So when it comes to Jamie being responsible for other unsolved murders, they're still processing his admission of guilt for Yvette Peña's killing. Prosecutor Nick Lackey and I discuss. Do you think he's likely responsible for other unsolved murders?
It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Though what gives me, detectives, and others pause is, would Jamie be capable of not bragging about it? Hard to say.
One of the things that I think I've learned doing this job is that anything is possible. People are complicated and in a lot of ways messed up more than most of us could imagine.
And this is where I'd like to point out that while some could see Jamie's jailhouse interview with me as a time he spent bragging about his crimes, I have mixed feelings. For one, I was the one who requested that interview. And despite what Jamie's ex-wife said about Jamie supposedly telling her he was going to reach out to me, he never did. He never called or wrote me. He never did another interview with a reporter. So, was he bragging? Maybe. Or maybe he was just answering my questions and showing his true colors. Regardless, he gave me enough information to look into. The murder he claims to have committed under the guidance of someone else when he was 13 is a bit tricky, because my station doesn't have data on all the homicides from the years 2000 and 2001. But I do know this. Every year in Kern County for decades, leaves dozens and dozens of unsolved murders. Now, looking at the murder he claims to have committed when he was 19, I started with making a timeline of when he was in prison and when he was out. He spent most of his life incarcerated, going in at age 15, released at age 19, where he was out for a year and 2 months before being arrested at the December 2008 house party hosted by his now ex-wife. He gets out about a year later in November 2009. Almost immediately, he gets his now ex-wife pregnant. They get married, and he's back in prison in September 2010, right after the baby is born. Again, out for about a year. He's released again in January 2011. He's free this time for about 2 months before he's arrested yet again. And you might remember the next time he's paroled is Halloween 2011. Yvette Peña is killed within a week. Looking at what Jamie told me about killing a 32-year-old woman in November 2007 and mentioning something about orchards, as far as Kern County murders go, there's no murder in our records that matches that. Though there was this case from early 2007.
Bakersfield police say 51-year-old Maria Esther Haugerty went missing Friday night. Then early this morning, their fears were confirmed.
The woman's body was found in this orchard. Police say she was found in the front seat of a black SUV, and they say it's obvious that foul play was involved.
Family told us Maria was stabbed in the chest. Is it unsolved? Well, kind of.
Police are asking the public to keep an eye out for the boyfriend, 51-year-old Francisco Nájera, who they believe may have killed her.
There is still an active murder warrant for the woman's boyfriend. He's just never been found. There are other murders, though, that took place during the short windows of time when Jamie lived free among us that I wonder about.
The Sheriff's Department is asking for your help in solving a homicide near Lamont.
The partially nude body of 29-year-old Sonia Cerna was found in June 2010. She'd been strangled to death. Family says there have never been any suspects in her murder. Both the above-mentioned cases didn't get much attention from the public. But one case in particular went essentially completely under the radar.
A farm worker's deadly discovery this morning has the Sheriff's Department now investigating a homicide. Sheriff's officials say that the body of an adult female was found on this access road inside a vineyard near Wheeler Ridge and Sebastian Road just south of Arvin.
That little news clip you hear is pretty much as far as the story went. An unidentified woman murdered and dumped in a vineyard. As we've already told you, murder, especially murders in orchards and vineyards, are not uncommon in Kern County. So this particular case of the woman found on March 29, 2011, was never reported on again. Until 7 years later, after I got a tip from a source while we stood next to each other, bored at some ceremony at the courthouse. The source told me the murdered woman in the vineyard had never been identified, likely because she'd been decapitated. You may recall this is a case we briefly told you about in episode 1. Here are some of the investigators that worked the homicide.
Something this gruesome is very unusual.
This is one of those types of murders and murder investigations that you come across maybe once in an entire career, maybe never. The blood had been drained from the body. The crime scene itself was very clean. It looked like somebody had taken a mannequin, removed the head of the mannequin, and then just posed the mannequin on a dirt road. Completely nude. She had been decapitated, probably between 40s or 50s, Caucasian or light-skinned Hispanic.
Mutilated bodies on homicides are pretty rare. We don't get too many of them. They do occur, but something to the point of full decapitation is pretty rare.
It was creepy. I remember having a couple of nightmares about it afterwards.
And there was no trauma on her body other than her missing head and severed thumbs, which have never been found. Oh, by the way, not having thumbs also makes it harder for her to be identified.
She does have some surgical scars from a single mastectomy as well as a C-section. Beyond that, we don't know anything about her. The investigation, unfortunately, became cold shortly thereafter due to a lack of identification of the victim.
There's a suspect or suspects out there who committed this crime and apparently were fairly comfortable committing this crime, and they're still out there.
Could Jamie have been her killer? Our records show Jamie Osuna was out of prison when the body was discovered. 2 days later, March 31st, 2011, he was arrested for a parole violation. I've talked to Kern County Sheriff's detectives about this. They say while Jamie now does have an alleged history of decapitation, this crime overall doesn't fit his known MO. His MO, based on Yvette Pena and Luis Romero's murder, show an elaborate display of gore and torture, and kind of a mess. But during my interview with Jamie, he sort of acknowledged the sloppiness aspect of the crime scene for Yvette Pena's case.
I left all my fingerprints and DNA and all that. I've done this many times before. I've done crimes before, and I know how to clean shit up. If you look at the pictures, or if you look at the, obviously it's going to come out later on, but if you do look at, everything, there was no attempt to clean anything up. There was no bleach, there was no type of cleaning materials, none of that. Everything was just done and left with, and that was it.
Going back to the letters Osuna sent the district attorney, in 2013, he mailed a letter with a cutout of 4 women from an ad in a magazine. In his usual fashion, he drew Joker smiles and stab wounds on the women. He also writes first or last names to the victims I have killed, and focus on the names. The names Richard, Betty, Carlos, and Donald are written next to the cutout of the female models. Underneath the cutout, he writes, "They're in Arvin and Lamont?" ? I try not to read too much into anything, but I gravitate towards his mention of Arvin and Lamont, as the 3 women whose cases we've mentioned were all found in rural areas just outside Arvin and Lamont.
Okay, so we're done.
After my interview, a sheriff's detective went out to interview Jamie about unsolved murders. Well, he tried to at least. Jamie wouldn't talk. The detective said Jamie mentioned wanting guarantees from the district attorney before he gave any information about other crimes, and it appears Jamie's attorneys and the DA never actually had a discussion about it. Jamie was sentenced, and that was that. But I don't think we should let it go that easily, especially because no matter how likely it could seem to investigators that Jamie was lying to me about the 2 additional murders, I've found police reports from his 2011 arrest where within hundreds of pages, there's one line that jumps out at me. A woman who knew Osuna was interviewed by investigators when they were still searching for him. He'd just become a suspect in Yvette Pena's murder after her body was discovered at the El Morocco motel. That woman told detectives Jamie called her and said, quote, "You already know about the Morocco. I killed 2 others before that." We've contacted both Jamie's new defense attorneys and the new prosecutors working on the latest murder case against him in a neighboring county. And I've written to Jamie recently, asking him to consider telling me more about these 2 murders. He hasn't responded. We can only hope this new murder trial will answer burning questions about Jamie Osuna. Burning questions about the unsolved murders, and questions like, how did the murder of Osuna's cellmate come to be?
How does that happen in a block where they do 30-minute security checks? This is not right.
How did Osuna get a cellmate and end up butchering him less than 24 hours later?
Do you know how hard it is to dismember somebody? To that extent? Are you shitting me? The cops told me it was the worst thing they've ever seen in their life, and it's gonna haunt them till the day they die.
That's next time on the final episode of The Man with 1,000 Faces. The Man with 1,000 Faces is written and reported by me, Olivia Lavois. Maricel Maldonado is our editor and sound mixer. Patricia Rocha is our executive producer. Michael Trihey is our news director. For photos and bonus content, go to 1000facespodcast.com. Copyright Nexstar Media Group, Incorporated. If you like this story, please check out another project of ours, one we call Murdered and Forgotten. Our focus is identifying 2 Jane Does, both brutally murdered in 1980. We know who the killer is, But this story isn't over until we know who the victims are and can bring them home to their families. There are so many clues. Please go to murderedandforgotten.com.